Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to In the Know. The Latin Chamber of Commerce loves to keep you in the know, and today is no different. Today we have important information coming from the Department of Labor, and we have our friend Susanna from the United States Department of Labor, who's going to go through a very important presentation, and then I have some questions that were given to me by some of my members. And so this is really exciting, Susanna. I really appreciate you doing this.
Great, thank you, Peter, for having us. And I'm excited to share this information, which I'm sure that the LCC will find valuable as well.
Yeah, no doubt. You know, everybody kind of thinks Department of Labor, right? But then when they get the information, they listen, they're like, wow, I really needed to know that. So that's why I was excited when I had a conversation with you about making sure that our businesses and our small business members understand what they're doing and understand that you guys are a resource for them. So let's get right into it, Susanna.
Of course. So thank you for having me, like I said, and I'm the community outreach specialist for the Las Vegas District Office. So the information that we will be discussing today is what we call misclassification or 1099 independent contractors versus employees. So as America emerges from this global pandemic, we want to ensure that the public knows that the Wage and Hour Division is focused on protecting the workforce and supporting employees and employers alike on the laws that we enforce. And just a short disclaimer, this presentation is intended as general information only and does not carry the force of legal opinion. Wage and Hour has been and is open for business and has always been ready to help. WHD helps workers, advocates, employers, and other stakeholders understand worker protections and employers' responsibilities. As a federal agency, the Wage and Hour Division covers the same laws all throughout the country with jurisdiction in every state and U.S. territory. The Las Vegas District Office oversees the state of Nevada. Our labor laws cover workers regardless of immigration status. Our protections apply regardless of status, and workers are not questioned about their status by our staff. The goal of today's presentation is to share information about 1099 independent contractors, or sometimes known as independent workers. So what is it that we do? First, the Wage and Hour Division was created by the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938, and our mission is to promote and achieve compliance with labor standards and to protect and enhance the nation's workforce. We balance key strategies: enforcement, both complaint and agency-initiated investigation, outreach to workers, worker advocates, and community organizations, compliance assistance directly to employers, as well as the promulgation of regulations that promote compliant behaviors to be more strategic and achieve a greater impact. So understanding worker classification under the FLSA. Today we will address the misclassification of employees as independent contractors, or what constitutes a worker as an independent contractor or an employee. This is a priority for WHD and can potentially impact the payment of minimum wage, overtime pay, record keeping, family and medical leave, as well as many other federal and state laws. So what is misclassification? A worker must be an employee for the FLSA's minimum wage and overtime protections to apply. In fact, WHD can only enforce these provisions of the FLSA when an employment relationship exists between an employer and a worker. The FLSA defines an employee to mean an individual employed by an employer, and it defines employee to include to suffer or permit to work. The FLSA broadly defines the scope of who is an employee under the Act, and as a result, most workers are employees under the FLSA. The Wage and Hour Division does not rely on titles or tax information to determine whether someone is an independent contractor or an employee. We look at the nature of the relationship. Unlike true independent contractors who are in business for themselves, employees have less control and ownership of the business where they're employed. Calling an employee an independent contractor or giving them a 1099 form does not make them an independent contractor under the FLSA. And this graph just demonstrates the employer relationship. So most workers are employees under the FLSA. WHD has found a substantial number of workers to be incorrectly classified as independent contractors when in fact they should be classified as employees. We have recently observed an unfortunate increase in this trend. For example, including restaurant dishwashers are incorrectly classified as independent contractors. Although misclassification can occur in any industry, it is especially prevalent in the construction, janitorial, home care, childcare, transportation, and warehousing, and meat and poultry processing industries. In addition, ending misclassification is important in our work to create equity in the workplace. According to a study by BLS, women and people of color are overrepresented in 7 of the 8 occupations at highest risk for misclassification. By enforcing and pursuing the proper classification of workers, WHD supports the ability for people of color, people with disabilities, women, and other protected classes. WHD does recognize that properly classifying independent contractors is not only important for individual employees and employers alike, but plays an important role in the local, state, and national economies. Misclassification denies workers important benefits and protections, such as minimum wage, overtime pay, and access to unpaid family and medical leave. And it also shifts the employment tax burden to employees. Additionally, misclassification creates an economic burden for law-abiding business owners who cannot compete on a level playing field with employers who are evading federal requirements by misclassifying workers. Employers may not classify an employee for any reason under the FLSA. Employers cannot sign or give away their rights under the FLSA. Even if employees feel in certain situations that they would best be served as independent contractors, their proper classification under the FLSA is still based on the facts in the individual circumstances and the law, not on worker or employer preference, prior agreement, registration, or form of payment. An employee may not be misclassified based on where they work. So there are several factors to consider to determine whether an employment relationship exists. No single fact or circumstance is sufficient or predominant. In order to make the determination, a number of factors must be considered and weighed. WHD looks at the total picture. How does the individual work, when, where, who determines the conditions, nature, timing, and pricing of work? To what degree is the individual financially invested in the business, supplies, equipment? To what degree does the individual hire himself or herself out to others to provide services for other businesses or others? Under the FLSA, an employee, in contrast to a worker who operates a business of their own, is one who, as a matter of economic reality, follows the path of an employee and is dependent on an employer for work. In other words, an employee generally has limited control over where, when, and how work is accepted, assigned, and completed. An employee may have some investment in tools and equipment and may use a private vehicle in the course of their work, but it is less likely to carry their own insurance, sign contracts on behalf of the company, have financial liability for businesses, or determine the type and prices of services and products. WHD's guidance on misclassification is summarized in fact sheet 13. The key element to understanding misclassification is understanding how the FLSA defines employee, employer, and employment relationship. We'll discuss how to determine if a worker is an employee or a 1099 independent contractor. As I mentioned, fact sheet 13 lists the 7 factors, and here on this slide, we look at the factors of what constitutes an employee versus an independent contractor. And as a reminder, not one factor is more important or weighed more heavily than the other. All factors are considered. If an employee is claiming that If an employer is claiming that a worker is an independent contractor, they will need to review the slides, or I should say the factors on here, or Google Fact Sheet 13 to consider whether the worker is an independent contractor or an employee. So going into factor number 1, this factor focuses on how important the work is to the employer's business. Work is integral to the employer's business if it is part of the production process or is a service that the employer is in business to provide. For example, a tile installer performs work that is integral to the business of a flooring contractor. A flooring contractor relies on installers to provide the primary services offered by the business. Therefore, the work of the tile installers is integral. If a business hires someone to repair a copier in the office, on the other hand, that work is not integral to the business. To the extent that the worker is providing goods or services that are integral to a firm's business, it is more likely that the worker is an employee versus independent contractor. If a firm cannot function without the worker or the work that they're performing, this suggests that the worker is an employee. This is generally a common sense evaluation. Some questions to consider regarding this factor is the work part of the employer's production process? Do the workers perform a service that the employer is in business to provide for its customers or clients? The second factor is opportunity for profit or loss. This not only means if the worker decides to go into work that day or not, but if the independent contractors do typically have the ability to make independent business decisions, such as a decision to make investments in new equipment, expand or limit services, to hire staff, or to set quality standards and assurances. To determine independent contractor status, we need to consider such questions as whether the worker has the authority and ability to add or discontinue a particular product line, to change pricing structures or fees, to add staff or reduce the size of a department, or to determine when and how refunds are offered. If the worker has full opportunity for both profit and loss, they are more likely independent contractor. For example, a 1099 contractor may make a decision such as to expand services and gain profit as a result of increased business, or suffer losses if customers don't purchase those businesses. Though an employee may work more or fewer hours depending upon demand for services, they don't typically determine when to expand our business or how it operates. Importantly, when analyzing this factor, it is also important to consider whether the worker faces possible loss as a result of the worker's independent business decisions. And another relevant factor to consider is whether the rate for the work was negotiated or if it was set by a firm. For example, an independent contractor can often negotiate the fee for service, the price of their labor, or the cost of the job. If the firm dictates the rate of pay and fee with no negotiation or little, the worker is most likely an employee. Third factor, investment in facilities and equipment. So have the workers made an investment that indicates that they are in business for themselves as opposed to purchasing tools of the trade that employees usually purchase? Some considerations is the investment substantial? Is the investment used for the purposes of sustaining a business model beyond the job the worker is performing? This factor compares the worker's investment in the business to the employer's investment in their business as well. The worker and employer must have similarly weighted investments in the business in order for this factor to suggest that the worker is an independent contractor. A true independent contractor might invest in a truck for their business, carry insurance for their company, and employees who work for their business, rent an office space, maintain service contracts for equipment and vehicles, and pay for business-related licenses and fees. A worker is not an independent contractor simply because they purchase tools or equipment to do a specific job. Rather, the workers' investment must be a substantial capital investment that is used to sustain an independent business model in order to indicate the independent contractor status. Fourth factor, skill and initiative. So workers with specialized skills who can deploy them at their own discretion are most likely to be 1099s. The key phrase is at their own discretion. The use of specialized skills without freedom to decide how and when to deploy them would be evidence that a worker is an employee. Specialized skills do not necessarily indicate contractor status if the worker is economically dependent on the employer. A few questions related to this factor are, do the workers come to the job with specialized skills, or does the employer train the workers, or does the work require little training? If the employer trains the worker, this could suggest that the worker may be an employee. So the permanency of the relationship is also considered. A permanent or indefinite relationship with the employer suggests the worker may be an employee. It's unlikely that a true independent contractor will choose to work with only one firm. Instead, a true independent contractor will market or sell services to a wide selection of users. However, the absence of a permanent or indefinite relationship does not automatically indicate the worker is an independent contractor. For example, a certified home health aide may provide services to several consumers for varying lengths of time, but the worker's relationship with the home health care agency is consistent and has no predetermined end date. The caregiver, the care provider receives assignments from the agency on an ongoing basis, even though specific consumers or services may change. The care provider is dependent on the agency to be connected with consumers and for the regular offer of work. This care worker is most likely an employee. Additionally, the absence of a permanent or indefinite relationship does not alone indicate that the worker is an independent contractor. 6, control. So an employer generally controls the worker through the setting of the hours, directing the method of work to be performed, setting prices, supervising or disciplining the worker. The more discretion and decision-making that is done by the firm, the more likely the worker is an employee. So control can be direct or indirect. For example, an employer may directly control a worker by telling the worker which tasks to do and how to do them. An employer may also indirectly control a worker by supervising the quality of his or her work. An employer can still exert control over a worker even if that worker teleworks or works off-site. However, the employer's actual exercise of control, again, is not necessary, as all factors must be considered. The employer's lack of control does not automatically indicate the worker is an independent contractor. What actually matters is whether the worker actually exercises control over meaningful parts of the relationship. For example, does the worker decide when and how work is performed and for what fee? In other words, a worker may set his or her own hours within flexible schedule arrangement, may telework or perform the job in some combination of on-site and off-site work, and may work without direct supervision and still be an employee. And again, we have several questions related to this factor. For example, who sets the worker's rate of pay? Who sets the worker's hours of work? Or determines how many hours must the work be done per week, or creates and offers a flexible schedule arrangement to work those hours? And who determines how that work is performed, to what standards? Who sets policies and procedures? And can the worker do work for other companies or hire helpers for their own accord? And the final factor is independent business organization. So does the worker compete with others in the market for the work, or advertise or plan work, or demonstrate initiative, suggesting that the worker is in business for himself or herself? If there is little or no impact to attract new business and the worker is content to wait to be offered more work by the employer, this is also an indication that an employment relationship exists. There are common problems. So for example, working at multiple locations or on multiple contracts is not the same as working for multiple employers. Construction workers, janitors, home care workers, and child care workers are often employees that work at multiple locations as part of this employment. It doesn't mean that they are true 1099s. Working from home, working a flexible schedule, or working without direct supervision does not make a worker an independent contractor. The degree of specialized skill possessed by a worker is less a determinant than the amount of control, discretion, and independence actually exercised by the worker. All investments in a trade are not created equal. The investment an independent contractor does in the business and not just tools is generally substantial. There are also related problems, for example, volunteering. If a worker is volunteering their same services as to what they were hired to do, they still remain an employee and must be paid for this so-called volunteer time. Another factor to consider are trainees or students performing work that the employer is in business for or that they were hired to do. This time is also paid. An exception, of course, would be if that student is part of an approved university or school program where they are getting school credits. There are plenty of resources that the Wage and Hour Division offers, including a misclassification website, About Misclassification, Fact Sheet 13, e-laws regarding independent contractors that can be viewed directly on our website, as well as a video series. Other online resources are worker.gov. This site covers common workplace concerns for workers. Employer.gov, on the other hand, is aimed for small businesses and employers regarding a variety of federal labor laws, not just wage and hour. And you may be interested in to check out irs.gov as well as workcomp.gov, which also do relate to 1099, especially the irs.gov when it comes to taxes. Or you can also contact us directly. Our toll-free number is listed on the slide, or you can call our local Las Vegas district office or myself. Phone number is on the slide, or you can email me, and you can also visit dol.gov/agencies/WHD for further information. And just here are some of our social media sites that you can connect with us to be up to date to what Wage and Hour and the Department of Labor is up to. Thank you.
That was fascinating because, I think people are often confused between, 1099 employees and or 1099 and employees, right? I have found that a lot of folks feel like if they have anybody working for them, that's almost like an employee, and it's not always the case. There's differences between the 1099 and employees, like you pointed out, and really appreciate the resources that are available so that businesses don't get into trouble.
Yes, and that is one of our primary objectives as well, that we do want employers to be aware of what their rights are as well.
So I want to get into a few questions that were brought to me when they found out we were going to have this webinar. Can I provide an employee a 1099 form or classify them as an independent contractor if they request it and still pay them as an employee?
So we do run across this question a lot, whether employers call us through our investigations or employees sometimes call us. And the short answer is no. Employees cannot give away their rights even out of their own accord. Employers cannot suggest this and go through with it, even if they are still treating them in all other aspects of employees. They must abide by the entirety of the law.
Interesting. Okay. Another one was, does a worker's legal status affect their classification status as a 1099 worker versus a W-2 employee?
So no, their status of what it may be does not affect if they are considered an employee or an independent contractor. If by analyzing these 7 factors, it leans that the worker is an employee regardless of their status, the employer must classify these workers as employees.
Interesting. What if I hired an independent contractor that is licensed and has hired workers below them to perform the work?
Thank you for asking me that question. And we do run this a lot, especially in the construction industry.
Yep,
For example, there may be foremen that are hired as independent contractors. They bring in their own crew that they hire them. If this foreman and their crew are essentially working in the same field that the construction project is of what the construction firm is in business for, and the employer pays the foreman, who then has to pay the workers underneath. This is only what we consider a scheme to circumvent the law, and these workers are still employees of that firm, especially if their rate of pay is based on a piece rate of a day rate. It still is going to lean more likely than not that they are W-2 employees.
Interesting. Okay, and so where would people go if they have further classification questions and things of this nature that you just covered? Where do they go? Who do they call?
They can, of course, call our local Las Vegas district number. Our phone number is 702-928-1240, or they can contact me directly. My phone number is 702-928-1253, or my email, sanchez.susana@dol.gov. And when whoever they call us, they can call us confidentially. We do not share that information. It's simple. Yes, that is a big concern from employers and employees alike. If they don't want to provide their business name, that's fine. We don't need them. We just give them the regulations and additional resources for the questions that they may have.
Well, that was excellent. And I know we're going to be doing some more stuff together in the future, bringing more great information to all those small businesses and all those folks out there that need to know how to do things the right way so that they don't get into trouble later on down the road. So again, thank you folks for watching In the Know, the Latin Chamber of Commerce, keeping you in the know. That's what we do. Do not hesitate to call us. We are here for you. We want you, our members, our community, to always be at the best they can be. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.